you know, the way various groups of black people categorize ourselves, right? So let's say the melanated people here, right? The brown people, right? Dark brown people, copper color. We're here already when the white man gets here. Christopher Columbus never stepped a foot on America, right? So we know that he never discovered anything, but when he got lost, right? And his peoples got lost over here, right? They seen that we was already here, we was thriving, we had our tribal and nomadic ways of living, right? And there was already African explorers who came over here already doing trade and things of that nature, right? And so within that, there was already populations of people that were here, right? Now we know that the Native Americans, of course, were slaughtered, right? Because the white man wanted to take claim of America. But when you do trace root genealogy and people go look at their family history and they do one of those tests, they're gonna be like, wait a minute, my family was here, which also gives me rights under these treaties in America, right? And so one of the most, I think, highest forms of argument that I hear is that black people can't get reparations because specifically of the word black, that is not a nationality. So what then do you say to that particular argument? Because I'm 100%, 1,000% for reparations. I just want to know, do we have to change the language in order for the law to be written?
No, we don't have to change the language. This whole thing where you have to have a flag that's recognized by the UN and all of that stuff. Well, you have a rainbow flag that's not represented by the UN, and LGBT white people get all types of money and benefits. Some of the Native American tribes, these were tribes that were named by the Spanish. When the Spanish came along and saw a bunch of different tribes living among the Creek area, they said, well, you guys are Creek Indians.
Yeah.
When they saw some Native Americans and black Aboriginal people living together, they said, those look like runaways. And the word for runaway at the time was Cimarron. So they called them Cimarrons, which turned into Seminole. Yeah. So these names come from these different places, and the names vary, but these people are compensated. We can get compensation without having to do all of this crazy paperwork because they owe us. We're supposed to get what we're supposed to get. And going back to the whole narrative about us having some black Aboriginal people here, that's absolutely correct. When all of the European explorers came here, Columbus's brother, Pizarro, Balboa, every single one of them said that they saw black-skinned people here who looked like the same people who were in Africa. Almost every single one of them. We get the notion that a Native American is the mongoloid-looking person, which is just one variation of the Aboriginal people here. They would use the red-skinned natives many times to be pitted against the black-skinned Aboriginals. They were the ones who were helping to capture some of the black-skinned Native Americans and Aboriginals. And then at one point, they started to redefine some of the natives who were black-skinned and called them Negro. This is very well documented. Then going into the 1900s, they had something called the Dawes Rolls, where they had a census where they were going to take track of all of the Native Americans and the Aboriginal people. The black people, they just labeled them freedmen or Negro, and white people who wanted to get some of the benefits of being a Native American paid money under the table. They paid $5 to get listed on the census form. And that's where the term $5 Indian come from. Most the people claiming Native American that you see are white people who ain't got now drop of damn Native American blood in them.
This is a fact. This is a super fact. I think what's the tribe? I don't want to get it wrong. The tribe they out there in the Southamptons. They're the only black, like fully black tribe that you go.
Shinnecock?
Yeah, the Shinnecock Nation. So they invited me up there. I went to go speak to some of them. And now they're the only tribe that has never left their land, so they never lost it. So their land is not in the treaty of the United States government. It's in their own treaty, so they have true sovereignty, right? And so it perplexes me that when you go up there, this is right next to the Hamptons, right? And then they hate, them rich people hate them over there because they got real true sovereign claim to the land. But they're as dark as you and darker than me. Some are lighter, right? But most of them are dark-skinned black people.
I think Flavor Flav's is a
Yeah.
descendant from that
Flavor
tribe.
Yeah.
Flav is a
Old Dirty
Native
Bastard
American.
was
Yep,
descended
exactly.
from that tribe. Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah.
but we get this notion in our head that they look like, Mexicans,
Right.
modern day Mexicans as they do today. So that skew that's in our head of history is just wrong, because when we think about our story and time, what was happening during that time, we think about the modern Hollywood actors, right, that are played as Native Americans.
Right.
We don't think of Old Dirty Bastard. You know what I'm saying? We don't think of Flavor Flav, right? We don't think of somebody that looks like you and I. So we don't even think to dig and look into that, right?
And what's interesting, a lot of black artists back in the day, they would acknowledge their Native ancestry. Chuck Berry had Native ancestry.
Yeah.
James Brown had Native
Yeah.
ancestry. Take a good look at James Brown.
Yeah.
You dig? Take a real good look
Yeah.
at him. You can see it.
Yeah.
Johnny Mathis.
Yeah.
That's another one. So many
Michael
of them
Jackson
would
looked like
yeah.
he probably did too.
Yeah. The Jackson family does.
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
He was part Native American. Look at how he dressed. He would dress like a Native American when you look back at how
That's
he
a
dressed.
fact, with the fringes and stuff.
Yes, indeed. So we knew, we've always known that.
Yeah.
We've always had that camaraderie with that ancestry. And in the Jim Crow era, there was a man named Walter Plecker, who was a part of the Vital Statistics Office in Virginia. They started doing paper genocide. They would look at black people, look at their birth records, and anybody who looked like they could have any black ancestry, they would reclassify them as Negro. Whatever tribe they were from, like, nah, his nose is too big, Negro. Lips too big, Negro. And they would do this all up into the 1960s. The Loving versus the State of Virginia case, where they did that movie about the black woman marrying this white man, she's really a Native American. A lot of folks don't know that. I want y'all to look that case up. That's really a Native American. She's an Aboriginal person. But she was reclassified as a Negro. So that paper genocide is a real thing.
Absolutely, and that's why we really, our history is so entangled.
Yeah.
You understand me? And it's kind of, you got to go in there and release the knots.
Yeah.
Like when I study John Horse,
Yeah.
and I'm looking at how, number one, his story is incredible.
Yes, it is.
The man fought multiple war fronts, right? He fought against America, he fought for America, right? He fought on the side of the Seminole Indians. He was given his freedom in Florida. Then it was taken back, right? And then he ended up going missing in somewhere in Mexico. But when I think about the significance of that, it's like, of course, we don't, you want to teach this in American history school, right? They talk about critical race theory and things of that nature, but that doesn't even go deeper enough to expose, because American history has to be exposed, not just taught.
Yeah.
This is the reality of it. It has to be an expose on, wait a minute, this black man was directly, and then, when you go into that history, you see that the Indians had, or the Native Americans had their own form of slavery as well. It wasn't chattel slavery, but they owned blacks as well. So when you expose that, you're going to see lineage, though. You're going to see children. You're going to see marriages, right? And then you're going to say, wait a minute, this is my family right here. My family is traced back here. Your government made a deal for this land that my family lineage would own this. So of course, we don't need you to know your story. We're not going to teach this in school. We don't want you to start having claim to rights to land. We spent this whole last 100 years trying to steal all of your land from your people.
Exactly. And going into John Horse, that was a phenomenal brother. That was one of the greatest military leaders in American history.
Yes.
That's never talked about. This was a brother who was down there in Florida fighting in the Seminole War, and they've always made the Seminole War seem like it was a Native American against the
Right.
government. Even they at the time said, this is a Negro war. We can lie later, which is what they're doing now. But they said when they were fighting, we got to stop playing. These are Negroes and they're beating the brakes off of us because they don't want to be on no plantation and they're fighting to the death. It was black people down in Florida burning down plantations. They halted the slave business down in Florida. They were freeing people, slaughtering the white generals and the white U.S. Army military personnel. Many of those counties down there are named after the white people who were slaughtered. Dade was slaughtered by some of those black Seminoles. Dade County is named after him. The Seminoles went in there, the brothers, which I call the Maroons, because that's what they were. They were living in the swamps.
Yeah.
They hopped out on Dade and slaughtered like 100 of his guys.
Yeah.
They made a treaty with the United States saying that they could get their freedom if
Right.
they chose to move out of Florida. So they fought and won their freedom. They never frame it like that. They got their freedom and they were told they got to move to Indian Territory in Oklahoma. That's why a lot of the black Seminoles ended up in Oklahoma. some of the redskin natives were trying to enslave them, so they said, "Oh, let's go down to Mexico. We got to deal with them down there. They'll let us come down here and chill because we were working with the Spanish in Florida. We're still cool with some of the Spanish folks." So they went down to Mexico. The Black Seminoles, they were supposed to protect the border, which is what they did. They protected the border from the Comanche Indians. And they were going back and forth. After slavery, they would come back. They would work with the U.S. Army. They became the Buffalo Soldiers. They came all the way out here in the West. It was those black Buffalo Soldiers who were really Seminole Maroons who were the first park rangers. All of the national parks that we see in the West, they were the ones helping to clear the brush and build the structures in these parks and to maintain them and make sure that they weren't being vandalized. It was black park rangers doing that. We were the first people who were working in the mail service in the United States, the Pony Express. You couldn't have white people riding horses in hostile areas with these Native Americans. They would have gotten killed and scalped. They had to get black folks to do it. It was black folks riding those horses.
I mean, even this our history with horses and being the first, you know, cowboys and Lone Ranger and things of that nature. Our history is so, like, they took, you know, it's brilliant when you think of how they steal and then they remake history.
And you brought up the Lone Ranger. That ties in too. The Lone Ranger is based on Bass Reeves, a foundational black American who was enslaved. He was in Texas. He beat up his slave owner, got his freedom, went to live with the Black Seminoles in Oklahoma. Eventually became a lawman, very well respected. He had a Native American sidekick, a red Native American sidekick. When Hollywood got that story, they turned the Lone Ranger into a white man. Still kept Tonto, the red Native American. But
his story was so bad, man. When they basically like, man, no, we can't. When we tell this story, we got to say he was white.
Right, they had to whiten them up. We'll give him a black mask, but we'll just he's white.
That black mask was representing his black skin.
Right,
you know what I'm saying?
It was a symbolic thing.
It was symbolic. But that's amazing how, you know, now they complaining about Ariel being black, and I don't care about that because she not gonna be dating no black man, so that don't have no value to me.
The mermaid, and when we go into mermaids have been myths in Africa for years. There's been myths all over Africa about mermaids and people living in the sea. So that's old.
And even the brothers on some of the coast that can dive underwater and they can hold their breath for extremely long time periods and they can literally go swimming. And, you know, it would make sense if there was any myths of mermaids that they would be melanated people.
Of course.
You understand me? I think we get it confused because you look at, what's that fast swimmer? They be smoking the weed?
Michael
Phelps. So now the Olympics make the face of, you know, great swimmers is white. But black people have always been great divers and swimmers. This is where we always played in that water. And I think the myth being spread around that black people can't swim is what takes our mind out of that, right? But the reality of it is in every story and every myth, whether you're going to Greek, whether you're going to Roman, whatever story you come up with, the antithesis of that is made around a black body, a black being, right? A black character. And so they started mythologizing all the incredible things that they seen us do, and they couldn't help but to tell the story because this was like TV back in the day. Man, I seen this black man pick up a 3,000-ton boulder. Now you got stories of Hercules, right? But you can't tell this story like it's a black man. Everybody in the lands know this story, right? This is a white man that was this physique, right? So you got the Olympics today, but we know that in every sport we dominate. That Olympic stuff is for them to try to prove themselves against us because we have always been incredible at every single thing that we've done.
Yeah, and them having to whitewash everything. Off camera, we're talking about Hannibal Barca.
Yes.
When you look at history series, they always try to whiten him up. There could not be a white Hannibal because Hannibal had African elephants. To this day, African elephants really can't be tamed.
That's a fact.
If somebody tames them, it has to be a black person. So there was not a European riding those African elephants into those mountains.
Hell no.
That's logically impossible.
First of all, they would if you could tell because Hannibal Barker would be celebrated more if he was really white.
Right.
That's the reason that you don't hear about him. Oftentimes now you hear about it from black historians. You understand me? Because we know that we're telling our story, right? But otherwise they would praise him the same way that they praise Napoleon, the same way that they praise Julius Caesar and all of these other different people, but he's not thrown in that round table of names.
Exactly.
Right? But so they like, no, we're not gonna tell the story because then people go dive deep into it too much.
And then they're gonna start seeing the more ancient coins with his image on them, with the elephants on the back.
And then they always got some stupid reason on why, you know, everywhere they go, we're painted black, we have black features, and then they always come up with a reason why this had to be black or why the features were shown this way. Right. But when you look at Hannibal Barker, I think his story is a representation of our genius, specifically from us being military genius.
Yes, indeed.
Because we're always painted as a very peaceful, easily conquered people. But the reality of it is we are the father of military strategy, right? And through Hannibal Barker, you see a representation of that. Him taking 100,000 men and losing 80% of that and still conquering a 1 million man army, right? And being the only person to conquer Rome. So that is a powerful story that if you start a child off with that story of their history, they're like, oh, that's where I come from? Okay, I can handle anything. No, but if you take and you start their story, you were weak, bonded, and in chains, right? Then it's like, damn, I feel bad for myself. Right? So like where your story starts matters because that's where you begin your narrative of who you are and what you are capable of doing. So I can understand why they're like, all right, we gotta whitewash this, we gotta whitewash that, we gotta change the features here. Everything has to be changed because it's gonna be very hard for you to dominate a people who have the largest population on the planet Earth. You have to separate them, number one. You have to have all of them speak a different language. They have to have all different details and accounts of what history is. They can never see themselves as one because we would never be able to conquer them as one because we are the minority.
Absolutely.
So with whites being the minorities and blacks being the majority on this planet Earth, they can only psychologically beat us, right? Because this the only thing, and this happens through all our societies, right? You see the majority is always conquered by the minority. That's the reality everywhere on the planet Earth. And so you wonder what subdues these people from just rising up, right? It's a spiritual and psychological warfare that's played upon those people.
And we don't understand how much they study us, going back to Hannibal and the elephants. Remember, the elephants, that was the prototype for military tanks with the trunk and the big body and the tusk and all of that. That's the military tank. They've always studied us. And even some of the Maroon uprisings, they study that in military school now. And they put it in movies. For example, the Black Maroons down in Florida and on the East Coast, because black people were living in swamps doing sneak attacks against the white supremacists. One thing that the Maroons would do, they would wear red bandanas. And they would have something called the bloody flag. They would raise a red flag. Always look out for the bandanas, because that was something that the Moors were wearing too. Moors back in Europe would have those red bandanas. That represented fire and war. When you look at movies like Rambo, where Rambo is this character fighting as if he's a Maroon. He's fighting in the swamp all the time. He's always wearing a red bandana. You dig? They get all of these symbolisms from us. They know what they're doing, and they give little winks and nods to each other. They study everything we do and then formulate that into their culture as if they came up with it.
See, that's powerful when we talk about the swamps. And I was listening to an interview with you, and y'all was talking about, you know, voodoo, right? And how, you know, we utilized the swamps because we were masters of it, right? And we knew that they weren't masters of it, and we can beat them in that particular terrain. But specifically when it comes to voodoo, voodoo is seen as, you know, as what's the word I'm looking for? You know, a bad thing, essentially, right? And of course, you know, the dark arts and everything to black and dark is considered to be bad, right? And then of course, white magic is considered to be good. But the reality of it is we've been masters of the elements, right? And the spirit, our entire existence. So you don't get the Haitians winning, you don't get Natty and the Maroons winning without them being able to utilize, right, the elements.
That's all it is. Voodoo and all that, it's you connecting with nature and the spirit realm. That's all, because it's all the same.
Right.
But us understanding that in a real way, not white Jesus.
Right.
You dig?
Yeah.
Understanding that we are the essence, we are all of this stuff. We as melanated people we are nature. We are the spirit realm. All of it is connected, and we can get our strength from that. And that's what they did in Haiti. And that scared the hell out of white people, and it scares them now. That's why they made voodoo something negative.
Yeah.
Because what we started doing, we started getting in those swamps with those alligators where white people couldn't go into. Even here in the Americas, we would live around those wild animals because we were on the same page with them. We weren't afraid of them. We had a spiritual connection with them. Even in Africa today, you don't see a lot of African people getting attacked by the animals because they have a relationship spiritually with the animals.
Yeah.
When we and our brothers and sisters were fighting these white supremacists using their voodoo system, that scared the white supremacists so much, they started making movies in the 1930s about zombies and black Haitians.
Yeah.
The early voodoo movies had Haitians in them, them portraying Haitians. The word zombie, which the zombie genre is real big today, that comes from a Haitian man named Jean Zombie, who was killing white people in Haiti during the revolution. After the revolution was over and they were getting the French out, it was this light-skinned slave, former slave named Jean Zombie, who was slaughtering the French. So his name became synonymous with terror. That's where the word zombie comes from. So they've always been afraid of that. They taught us to be afraid of voodoo too. They taught us that it's witchcraft and it's evil. And then we start listening to the white supremacists and start forgetting our history and our essence because they've scared us out of it.
Because it disconnects us.
Right.
If you want to spiritually and psychologically control people, and they have this connection to the element that empowers them, you have to break that connection first, because that's going to give them confidence, right? Now they're in harmony with mentalism, right? Now they know how to use the power of the mind. They know how to use everything around them that becomes a solution for whatever problem that they have. And then we go into alchemy, right? So talking to my brother Idris Sandu, was talking about the difference between, like, you got manifestors and then you have alchemists. Alchemists use what they have. The manifestor is using mentalism to attract things into their reality to bring them forth. Now, of course, the combination of those are very powerful, but as a people, we have the ability to transform any substance into the tool that we very needed to free ourselves, right? So when you got a people who believe in systems, or what we call magic, right, which is really science and alchemy, right, and knowing the ability of how to apply that and create weapons and use our own spiritual force and will, then that's impossible to conquer those people. And you see that through Haiti, and then you see that through Natty and the Maroons, and I want to talk to you about that because I know you have a project coming up. Now, I went out to Jamaica, and I went up there, right, to the Maroon land, and I went to the grave site of Nanny, and then, you know, I'm deep on supreme mathematics and numerology, and she fought a 19-year war. So she one of them 19 keys, you know what I'm saying? But the significance of her is very powerful in her story because, you know, there was this one particular story where the British, right? The British were scared of her because they believed she could stop bullets, right, with her ass, or her for the channel, her glutes, right? So, but the story they say is that she calculated the distance of how far the bullets could fly, right? And so she marked in there in the dirt. So when they'd get close, she'd stand there, turn around, right, and show her glutes, and then when they would shoot, it would stop right there before it hit her butt. So they were afraid, like, wait a minute, this no magic, you know what I'm saying? And she knew the terrain so well that it was going to be impossible for them to defeat her. But the beauty of when her story ends, that she wins, and she refuses to take any treaties from the queen, and she goes back and become a gardener. And she lives a soft life. And to me, that's the story of, like, you know, doing a 180, right? A woman masculizing herself into the logical warfare to help her people get free, and then going back into the harmony of her feminine energy, right? And going back into softness. And so we have to learn, number one, there's no great revolution without black women, right? There's no nothing. But what is the end result? Our women have to be able to get back into their softness. Not to stay in a state of masculinity because they had to masculize themselves for warfare. Right? And that's what we're dealing with. So when people go through economic warfare and they're in poverty, that is a state and a condition that the people must fight out of.
Right.
So
right.
if the black man is not standing there with the financial education, with the ability to liberate themselves into wealth, then the woman now, of course, we know how the tools put her in that position, but she's going to masculize herself to get out of that. Because state of poverty is not a state for human beings to live a quality of life.
Absolutely.
But we have to have a plan to say, okay, now our plan is to bring our women back into softness.
And we have to understand that warfare is based on deception.
Mm-hmm.
What you just explained, the white supremacists know that too. They understand the importance of women to go back into their femininity and men to be into their masculine bag. This is why they are always promoting sexual confusion to black people.
That's a fact.
We can't get anything financed from the dominant society unless we say we have some questions about our sexuality, then the money and the checks start rolling left and right.
That's a fact.
They got black men out here, and Dr. Welsing said this was going to happen. She said this years ago. Black men are going to stop sagging, because sagging is really a form of femininity, because it masks itself as masculine gangster stuff, but really it comes out of prison and guys showing their asses to other men. She said eventually they're going to come out the sagging pants and start putting on dresses, and that's what we see now, and that's promoted all across the board towards us. When you look at hip hop award shows now, you got more dudes with dresses than women now.
That's a fact.
That's propaganda. So now you have black men being told to be more feminine, so naturally that's going to make the women more masculine, because who's going to protect me?
That's
Not this nigga in a dress.
Right.
So we're being deliberately buck broken as a group. That's why I did a movie called Buck Breaking.
Yeah.
The buck breaking didn't just stop on the plantation.
What does the word buck breaking mean?
Buck breaking comes from when slave owners would get a black male, and they would call us bucks, like an animal on plantations. And if there was a strong, powerful black man who they need to demasculinize, they would sexually assault them on plantations. We have to break this buck.
Yeah.
Just like in prison. The whole thing where we're going to take somebody's manhood, that comes from the white supremacists that they have brought into the prison systems now.
Right. That's a form of spiritually, conquering a person.
It's 100% spiritual conquering. That's all it's about. If you can conquer somebody spiritually, you got them mentally and physically.
Yes.
You see?
That's what you get with Dahmer. And the whole, because it's 2 points. One of them is a power, where if you see somebody who has a power that you don't have, they believe that they can take that power, you understand me, by literally eating this person, right? So they would eat the flesh, right? There's stories of, European warriors eating the flesh of Africans, because here are these big body, strong Africans, and they want that spiritual essence to come into them. And then so that goes into many ways, to where there's a psychological aspect that happens. Dr. Wesley talked about it when he said that showing us getting murdered on film a lot, and us watching that effeminates us, right? And it spiritually robs us, because we constantly seeing ourselves lose, we constantly seeing ourselves, oppressed, and it drains our testosterone.
Even before television, when they would lynch black people, they would put it on postcards and send the postcards of the lynchings all around the country. So that's absolutely true.
Yeah, that propaganda, that's the number one way to rule a people, is through propaganda. Not physical anything, because they understand that they can psychologically embed images, self-identity of who you think you are. And if I can get you to think that you are a victim, not a warrior, you are a victim. So now when you go out there, in your mind is the narrative and the behavior of a victim, not a warrior, right? If I show you as Superman, if I show you as Black Panther, now you're gonna come out there with this new self-image, and the way that you respond is going to be representative of your self-image. So no, it has to be psychologically damaging. You have to see a foot on your neck. So now you thinking, damn, in this situation, I want to be just like that image I seen. So instead, we have to have a counter propaganda machine and counterintelligence that says that no, we're going to teach you who you are from a confidence standpoint, from a warrior standpoint, from a king standpoint, from a military strategist standpoint, from a God standpoint. None of these things are damaging to you.